Poštovane gospođe veleposlanice, dragi prijatelji knjige, iznimno mi je drago što vas mogu pozdraviti ovdje u Muzeju za umjetnosti i obrt na večerašnjem događaju, na razgovoru sa jednim od najvećih i najvažnijih suvremenih svjetskih pisaca, gospodinom Ceesom Nooteboomom. Molio bih vas da gospodina Nootebooma i njegovog večerašnjeg voditelja, njegovog urednika Romanoma Simićem Bodrožića i gospodina Nootebooma pozdravimo jednim velikim aplauzom.
Good evening. It's a huge privilege to share this table and this water with an excellent, great writer, one of the finest European novelists, finest authors we have today, Mr. Cees Nooteboom. Yesterday he had an event in Slovenia. I heard it was excellent, but since we always have to be better than Slovenians, I want you to give another applause, at least 30% louder, for Mr. Cees Nooteboom. Thanks. I told you that I was proud to share this table with Cees. What I'm not proud of that much is my English, but since it's a bit better than my Dutch, I just apologize and I'm forced to keep this way. Mr. Cees Nooteboom, if there is an author of various genres. He's a novelist, he's a short story writer, he writes travel books, he's a poet. And if there is it's a vast body of literary work, yet very coherent one. But if there is a word, if I'm to pick the word that might connect all those fields, that might be a travel. Travel across the borders of genres, travel across any other border. And that travel, Mr. Nooteboom started in a way when you set out for your first journey, you were 17, you went with your bike to the border of Belgium, and then later on you hitchhiked, and then you wrote as a pair of your travels. There's another side of the medal is to write, to travel and to write. Then you wrote when you were 22, I think, Philip and the Others. And then it was a huge success. And then you set off to a journey to Suriname, which makes a couple to, let's say, which brought you to a real world in a way.
I think the world was real before that. I mean, Belgium is real. No, but you're cutting very quickly because it doesn't happen that quickly. I remember that, this first trip on a bicycle to Luxembourg, crossing the border, that was extremely important. Nowadays everybody's talking about borders, and suddenly borders have become difficult again. But to me, the idea of a border, so today we crossed the border between Slovenia and Croatia, that here there's an imaginary line. Here is the Queen of the Netherlands, and there the King of the Belgians. But only 1 meter further. Those ideas I found fascinating when I was young. So that has remained. And then when I was a little older, I told my mother, I'm going away. And I took a rucksack and went to our southern border, which in a small country is very near. And in a way, I've never returned. working as a sailor to South America, that was a few years later.
Yeah, but what I meant, you said in an interview that back then when you were writing Philip and the Others, you were in a certain way naive. Philip and the Others is a novel that has to do partly with a fairy tale world, but then your journey to tropics, working as a sailor on a cargo ship, heading to a romantic adventure, passing through tropics, seeing the poverty that ruled there or existed. It made it somehow more realistic, more real. That's what I was referring to.
Yes, it's perfect, but I'll try to explain. You live in a dreamlike atmosphere, you have not seen much of the world. So the first novel originated from traveling through the south of France, Arles, the Provence, and you write a dreamlike novel, and then it is suddenly successful, and your name is on the book, so you're a writer. Yeah, well, that's an important point, because as soon as your name is on the book and there is a book, then they say that you are a writer. I don't think I have thought a lot about that. So at a certain point, this distracts me, sorry. I have to concentrate. Thank you. So, let me try to get back to where I was. Sorry? I was in RES and I had this fantasy, this novel, and then suddenly they tell you, you know that the world probably is not like that. It's not a fairy tale. You can't write fairy tales all your life. And working on a ship to South America made me see what's really going on in the world.
It took you 8 years, I think 8 years, to write another novel, and then after that, it's Caballero Se Ha Muerto, and after that one, there was, during 16 years, you've been writing just travel books, not just, but, yeah.
I was going to say, not just. Writing travel is just as, and my travel pieces are literature as well, I hope. No. So, I was trying to say this. You write a certain kind of novel in which you were probably still very young, naive, then you discover the world has quite another dimension. I was trying to write a second novel, which is very important to me, but not very important to the public. Because then I try to think about what writing really is. That novel was published in France then, but somehow I understood one thing, that I had started so young, I did not have enough of what you could call connaissance du monde. I didn't really have enough luggage. And if you take writing seriously, you could go on writing, let's say, beautiful fairy tale-like things, but I knew it was not right. So traveling, you discover what the world is about. And then after 17 years, so you're waiting. And all the time your friends are publishing books. And you feel like a failure. And you have to cross that desert in order to come to the essential of what you probably were trying to say. Which, by traveling in Asia, in Africa, in America, I more or less feel I discovered. So these 17 years of crossing, I'm exaggerating, the desert is a very heavy sort of metaphor, but still, your friends publish books and you think, and they think you're out, you're forgotten. And then suddenly all the books came that I've been waiting for, which was Rituals, which was published in this country. And from then on, I will not say it was easy. From then on, it was just as difficult, but I knew that I had found the way how to get to what I was trying to say. All these travel things, in the meantime, are still part of my work. And for myself, I discovered Spain. That is this book. 15 years of Spanish travel. And, well, here I am.
Some other very interesting travels. In 1956, you ended up in Budapest during the revolution. In 68, you were in Paris. In 89, you happened to be in Berlin. So it seems that history is happening where Cees Nooteboom is, or it's the other way around.
I wouldn't put it like that, no. No. My American publisher put it in a different way. He said, "You're such a fast-moving target, we can almost never hit you." So it's different. Budapest was important in my life because of the political issue. Some two friends, photographers, called me in the middle of the night and said, "We are within 10 minutes leaving for Budapest. There's a revolution. If you want to come, you have to be ready down at your door in 10 minutes." And I did. And this, I wouldn't say it changed my life, but it changed my political views. And we saw everything that was happening there, which is probably more clear to you here than it was to my friends in Holland. So, I was immediately reminded of the war which I had lived through as a child. So there were dead people in the streets. There were secret agents. And the people had put money in their mouth and they spat on those people. Then there were executions. And I remember the atmosphere was very emotional. And a young girl coming to me and saying, "When are you coming to help us?" And I knew. I mean, even then, I was only 23. But even then I knew, nobody's going to help you. And then, I have only two hands. The Russians closed the country and I was out. And after that, that's very interesting, so many Hungarians came to the West and fled, which in retrospect, with the situation now, that they don't want to accept refugees, is very ironic. But they came in great numbers. Then, it was interesting because many people in Holland were then left-leaning and had a sort of, idea that if you discuss the ugly side of communism, the ugly side of revolution, they would say, well, the famous thing, if you want to make an omelette, you have to break eggs, etc., etc. But I then had the feeling I looked into the face of something that was, to me, not, to put it very simply, that. And when then, 30-something years later, I happened to be in Berlin, because in that period I was living in Berlin. When then the wall came down, I had the feeling that, at least in my life, things have become full circle, as they call it. And that was an extremely important moment again. But you mentioned Paris. Paris, the so-called événements, I didn't, in retrospect, they were not that important. More important was that in the same period, I was in Iran. And I was there with an English photographer. And we were approached. There's always something through which you suddenly understand. Because just before, we had had an occupation of the Iranian embassy in Holland. People were against the Shah, because the Shah was a dictator. So far, so good. So we were on the side of those people who occupied. In that same period, a very important philosopher, as Michel Foucault, headed demonstrations in Paris, in favor of Romanom. Foucault, as you know, was a homosexual. He cannot have understood the repercussions later towards the homosexuals of Iran. But anyway, I was there with my English photographer, approaching the holy mosque of Qom, when a group of black mullahs came up to us and spat in our faces. Now there's something very clear as a statement, it is somebody else's spit in your face. And then I thought, this is very different. This is not nice, lovely, intelligent, young, liberal students. This is, and I'm still sorry that I could not invent then the word fundamentalist. What I wrote, because I wrote about this.
Purist.
Yes, thank you. Muslim purist. And I always say it's such a pity that the CIA doesn't read Dutch, because they could have understood much more from me than they had from their secret services.
In the preface to one of your travel books, dealing with the Islamic countries that you visited back then, you wrote, these histories are written by a innocent traveler, or better to say, a traveler in times of innocence.
Yes.
When did we lose that innocence? Or when the world lost that innocence? What happened?
By everything happening now, because when I was traveling, let's say, in Tunisia, and in those years, beautiful mosques, Tehran, incredibly beautiful mosques, and fantastic, really old culture, beautiful old poetry, Hafiz, Omar Khayyam, all of that. But now we have seen, let's face it, also the other side of Islam, which is sometimes very aggressive, like ISIS. But what a lot of people, I think, have not understood is what we did to the Muslims that come to our countries. Because, for example, Holland. I'm not speaking about Croatia because I don't know anything about your sex laws and but in Holland you have lots of sex shops. And I was walking once, and they're quite vulgar, and you see all the instrumentarium and okay, this is because we are liberals, we think, and everything should be possible. So I walked behind a Muslim family, man, wife, child, and they were passing one of those shops, and the child was looking, and I saw how the mother took the child. To those people, our, let's say, so-called liberal values are anathema. This is to them. So, in a way, I have a feeling we are each other's fifth columns, because some Islamists are afraid that their co-religionaries will accept our values because they think they're dangerous, and we are afraid of them in general because that they will try to force their values on us. But this is a double thing, which, of course, is important.
Let's go back to a beautiful book of yours. What we can see on that display are the photos of Simone Sassan, your wife and photographer. Some of those photographs are catching the parts of architecture, Mozarabe and Mudehar. I mean, when we were speaking about Islam, so there was a huge culture, Islamic culture taking place in Spain, flourishing in Spain. What would have happened if the Muslims had been expelled from Spain in 1492? What could we expect from that culture? Did you ever, yes, of course it occurred to you to think about it.
Well, you shouldn't think of 1492, you should think of 700 something. Spain lived for 700 years under partly Muslim domination. They were different Muslims, first of all. I mean, we were different Europeans, but they were different Muslims. You had, under the Caliphate of Cordoba, a sort of syncretism between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. What we should never forget is that the heritage of Plato, of all the Greek tradition, science, and philosophy was translated by Muslims. And the Italian Renaissance could never have taken place without these things. But, interesting enough, the ones that never profited from this were the Muslims themselves, because they left it, they became the different currents of and aggression. And anyway, there was a revolt. That is when what you call the Reconquista started in Spain in 700 late, where they slowly were depossessed from power, very slowly. It took a long time with El Cid. But in those times, there was a very normal cohabitation of the two faiths. So, I mean, there were things differently possible.
Excuse me, they cohabitated for a couple of centuries, you know, it's not just a snap of...
Yes, well, it depends on which part of Spain and how it all went. But some famous Spanish historians have said, if Pelago, that's the man, in the Battle of Covadonga had not turned the tables, then Muslim Spaniards would have discovered the United States. But it's just a thought. Now it seems implausible, but of course it was plausible. So the world could have been very, very different. But one is also to add that under different kind of Muslim, let's say, tribes is not the right word, but some were more enlightened than others. And it now has turned completely the other way. And that's why the situation is, in a way, frightening.
We stepped on the ground of Spain. So first time in the beginning of detours to Santiago, I don't know what would be the English title or not.
No, my English publisher
Roads to Santiago.
Didn't like the word detour.
Yeah, but it's crucial for your work.
Yes, but sometimes publishers aren't.
Yeah. Doesn't happen here in Croatia. But I wanted to ask you...
No, let me explain the idea of detour. Because people like books to have a clear sort of line. I was traveling in Spain. I love that country. I was traveling everywhere. Of course, I had already, now I'm going to confess a little falsehood. I had, of course, been already in Santiago. Santiago is an incredible city. And I knew about the pilgrimage, I read much about the pilgrimage. People actually walked for centuries towards Santiago. And I've met many pilgrims, I've been there many times. But for the sake of the book, Mr. Publisher, what I did is put Santiago at the end, so that it was a pilgrimage itself in writing. I had already, when I arrived, sentimentally and emotionally, because I've seen many pilgrims arrive. And you must understand, if you do the trip or the pilgrimage from the Pyrenees, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, Roncesvalles, you walk over 800 kilometers.
I did it.
You did it. You're a brave guy. And then you could tell the public. But you can never do right, because it's long, and you need at least a month. Either in the mountains you get the snow and you freeze to death, or you do it in the summer and it gets exceedingly hot. then the climate in that part of Spain is often rainy from the Gulf of Biscay, so it is not a very easy, nice trip. And, you know, things happen to people there. My Italian publisher, who's a woman, she decided with her husband was big in business, they walked together, but even further than that, they started in France. And he had to leave her in Lyon, and she went alone by herself. And she said that strange things started to happen to her. For example, she would feel presences, and she's a very rational woman, publishing international, interesting literature without overt religious. But she said things were starting to happen to me. So one day, I arrived at the door of a church, knocked, church closed, and I was walking away, disappointed, beautiful Romanesque church. And then she heard a voice behind her calling out, "Peregrina," so pilgrim. And she turned and it was the village priest. And she said, "Incredible what happened to me. You would not believe it. I went in with him, and in 3 hours, I told him my home life. And when I was finished, he said, 'Shall we now turn this into an official confession?'" From that time on, she's become really very religious again, not her husband. But these kind of things apparently happen to people. On the other hand, I have a friend, famous writer, I don't know who publishes him here in this country, called Tribine, great writer. Irish, yes, and he thought he would do this too. And after one day, he took the bus. So, it's not given to everybody.
The moment you said that you put Santiago at the end and you revealed us the secret we won't tell anyone, we swear, that you already have visited it. Now, your travel books are not written in a way Anglo-Saxons do it.
I know.
It was a compliment, in fact.
No, but some of the Anglo-Saxon travel writers are very, very good. It's just I have a different mental makeup. I feel you see what they do just for the sake of just that what I told you. I know some of them. So they will go from the source of the river to the mouth of the river with the Mississippi. Then there is a story. The story is already given. And they will tell you along the Mississippi about Mark Twain and this and that and everything that happens. And so there are different strategies, but I normally let myself parachute it in a given place and start from there on without preparing much. And normally what I do is when I'm there in some place, if it's a country that I understand the language, I will buy the local books, local folklore or whatever. But for example, in Japan, my wife and I have made the pilgrimage of the 33 temples. Why? Because a man that I admire, a Dutch publisher, now retired, or maybe even retired from life, I don't know, said to me, "You know, I've read your book on Santiago. It's nothing. It's a beautiful book, but that's nothing. I went to Japan and I did the pilgrimage of the 88 temples. 88 temples. So, I hadn't heard of this. And in Zurich, there's a very famous bookshop with travel books. And I saw there was also the 88 temple pilgrimage, but also the 33 temple pilgrimage, which sounded much more reasonable to me. In retrospect, I was right, because the 88 is really a parcours, if you see what I mean. Everybody will recognize you because those pilgrims on a white sort of costume, a certain hat, etc. Whereas on the 33 tables nothing is the matter. They don't recognize you, but in the 88, every Japanese will stop you and say you have to go there, this is the road there. And this didn't happen to us. It's extremely difficult at 33, because what will happen to you? First of all, you take the train from Kyoto. You cannot read the signs quite often. But that's okay, because they also put, in most cases, but not all cases, the name in our kind of writing. But then you arrive in the given place, maybe a small place, and you know you have to take the bus. And there are two buses, and they each have the same sign, but one says A and the other says B or something. You ask Japanese, and Japanese don't want to make mistakes. So they will look at you, very doubtful, and say something. Well, I mean, imagine this, you're in the middle of a wood, you see two signs, once more two signs. Both have the sign of the temple, but you don't know, is this a very long road or a short road? Or... So we have done the whole pilgrimage twice, and as I told you this afternoon, some of those monasteries are very high up there, and one of them had 888 steps, and they were not easy steps, you know, they were hewn out in the rocks and things. But the atmosphere in those monasteries is incredible. And so this one, the 88 one, in case you want to do it, it's called Shikoku, and you just walk. And it takes a long time, but it's logistically easy. The other one is called Saigoku, and this is the title of our book, Saigoku. And that is logistically very complicated, because you go to the tourist office in Kyoto, and they look at you, and they think, oh God, another of those. And
in Spain, to get back to Spain, you didn't have that kind of problems. You chose Spain in a way. At the beginning of this book, you say, or you write, that first it wasn't the love on the first sight. You visited Spain after you visited Italy. Spain seemed cruel and barren and dry and so on. But then you conclude, but it seemed to be like me in a way. Some kind of recognition between two of you, Spain and yourself. You spent part of each year in Spain. You have a house in Menorca.
Yes, that's not really Spain.
Yeah, it's not quite. Once you said that you don't count. When you think Spain, you think Castilla and Aragon.
Yes, the Meseta, the heart center of the country. And it has always appealed to me because it's really historically very interesting also. And the rest of Spain, beautiful parts, like I live on the island, that's the Balearics. I happen to be in a place where it is empty. But of course, the local population doesn't even speak Spanish, they speak Catalan, a form of Catalan, which is called Menorquin. To me, the attraction of Spain is the language, the Spanish language, the Castilian language. And I must say, in the beginning, after the opera buffa, which is lovely to be, because you must remember it was still the years after the war. I'm talking of a long time ago. Holland was rather grey and sinister just after the war, and it stayed so for quite a long time before rebuilding the country. Germany, if you would go there, was extremely destroyed. So the South, with all its light and all its, there's always been an appeal of Italy to Northern Europeans. Goethe, his Italian horizon. So when I came to Italy for the first time, I said, this is how you have to live. Yeah. I found it very pleasant. So when I came to Spain, first of all, the dictatorship of Franco, the Spanish soldiers, looked like Germans in dress somehow, because they had German helmets that we had seen during the war. And I noticed it was a harsh country. We have, of course, we Dutch, we have a history with Spain, a war of 80 years. Now there's only two things in which I think countries can understand each other. When they love each other or when they have a war. A lot of, for example, we had many wars with the English. There are quite a lot. We have no negative expressions about the English that I know of. But the English have many about us still. Double Dutch, Dutch courage, Dutch widow, and all kinds of negative things. We don't have them about the Spaniards. But there is something that has happened between our two countries, which is not, people are not very conscious of. I am, though.
How come that you fell in love with Spain? You said that it was not likely, but it happened certainly. And what I really enjoyed, I told you 19 years ago I made that road to Santiago from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, but I didn't have your book. Next time when I do it, I'll certainly.
Next time you write your own book.
No, I wouldn't dare right now. So much knowledge of history of Spain, of history of Europe, of culture, of Mediterranean, that is spread throughout your work. Not just that we see the importance of Spain for the whole Europe or the whole world, but in other book of yours, let's say we mentioned a book that also has to do with your Menorchian home, letters to Poseidon, and also with the entire Mediterranean and its culture. So this is obviously something that is a thread that connects your work.
I was educated, don't forget, by monks. My father died in the war, or just at the end of the war. My mother was alone with 3 children, one difficult.
Which one?
Thank you. And then she remarried a very Catholic gentleman, because my parents, my real parents, had divorced, though they were technically Catholics, like many people in Italy are Catholics and never go to church. So I was baptized, so I could go to those monastery schools, and this gentleman that married my mother was a very devout Catholic. So I was sent to Franciscan monks. I loved it there. The only problem was that they didn't love me. But I'm always, they kicked me out after 2 years, and I was sent to another order, to Augustinian monks, a slightly more intellectual order. And I had teachers, Greek and Latin. And I'm grateful forever, because I could never have written a book like the following story, I don't know how it's called in this country, without, because the protagonist of that book is a teacher of classical Greek. I could never have written those books without that kind of education. I was kicked out there again, so I never finished school. And I started to work at the bank, being 17 years old, and then started to travel. So my education was 4 years of monks and travel.
And you said so. You didn't finish that school at Augustine's either.
No.
So that's some authors, such as Alberto Manguel, they would call your work as open literature or literature of detours. You tend to leave your characters not being grasped by the lecturer's eye within one side. You know, they tend not to be closed. Your stories tend not to be closed either. But so
try to say this more clearly, because
you keep things open. Maybe such as
no. I understand more or less what you mean, but I think if you get it precise, they will. Because I know the subject.
What I want to say is, in your work, let's say it's very rarely, such as in this book, you finish the book saying, "My Spanish adventure is finished," or yes. But the rest of your books, novels, they tend to be the following story, or the story. They tend to be.
That's fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, it's two different things.
But isn't it true that your fiction and your travel books are communicating more or less the similar material?
I am able, through the fact that I travel a lot, to use my experiences as a traveler in a novel. Like, I don't know, Lost Paradise was published here, wasn't it? So there I have two girls from Brazil, and something bad happens to one of the girls. They are art students, so they're very preoccupied with angels, because one of them will do her doctorate or something on annunciations. You see, if you look at art a lot, it's also a kind of education. Maybe that's what you meant. But so these two girls, and one of them is raped in a favela, and they have all their youth, they have this fascination like teenage girls can have, and they kept it with the Aboriginals of Australia. So when this thing happens to one of the girls, they decide, or one of them, who is more, let's say, natural, strong person, decides that they will go to Australia. Now, I could never have written that novel if I hadn't traveled, A, in Brazil, and B, in Australia, and among Aboriginals. So that is how the travel comes into the novels. But the novels are fiction, and in this book there is no fiction. If you yourself do not keep somewhere in your mind the distinction, things get lost.
I wouldn't dare to contradict you. It's your word.
You should.
But many times you said that. So between two of those roles, role of a novelist, or your side as a novelist and writer of travel books, there's a huge importance of you being a poet. Poetry being, you're not translated as a poet here in Croatia, unfortunately, but you always stress the importance of that part of your work, not just for your poetry, but the rest of your prose work.
Yes, I mean, it's all true. But I mean, you should see me like a firm with three divisions. There's travel, and there is fiction, and there is poetry, and they mutually influence each other. But and I've also been writing essays on art. Just now there's a book out on Romanom Simićem. Because of the angels and the annunciations, watching, looking at art and writing, for example, on Botticelli, I could use this because these two girls are studying, and this brought the element of angels into the book. Because I try to, one of the girls gets ideas about annunciation itself. Because being a woman, she suddenly realizes Because we take Annunciation for granted. There's Mary and there's an angel. And she tries to visualize how that would work. So there's Mary sitting in her room, and suddenly there is this, imagine that you would have two grown-up wings, and you arrive in her room. That makes a terrible noise.
I wouldn't make that noise.
Well, I suppose you would have to, because you would be some kind of bird, you're an angel. And then you have a message, and you're telling her that she's pregnant, and she will be the mother of God. We take those things for granted looking at them, but something very special. Yes, well, tell them your opinion. Anyway, what happens is that this goes, and this now, my trouble comes into it really, factually. Because I happened to be in Australia when there was a festival in the city of Perth, which is the southwest of Australia. And there was a theatre festival going on. And what did the festival consist of? Somebody brilliant had an idea. They would hide angels all through the city. You only have to think of Zagreb. So you hide an angel in the National Bank, and you hide one angel in the Museum of Art, and you hide in some dilapidated ruin.
Government.
Anything. But the city was full of hidden angels, and the idea was, if you would travel together, you were not allowed to go with two, you were to go alone. And you were going to look how many angels you could find. It was fantastic. I did it. I thought, oh, there. And you enter here and there, and suddenly you find. And the angels were male, female, white, black, young, old. And they were there. And at the end of the day, you exchanged your experience. How many angels did you find? And these two girls, in order to earn some money, hire themselves out as angels, as extras. One of them stands on top of the National Theatre for a whole day. My protagonist, who is Dutch, I always have to have a Dutchman in my book, a Dutch literary journalist, enters a dilapidated house, and on the fourth floor and the third floor, he finds a young female angel. Now, this happened to me. I didn't do what he did, but I came there and I was alone. You were supposed not to speak to the angels if you found one, and they were certainly told they should never answer if somebody did. And there was this girl. With her wings, they were very clever. They did this in a very good way. You would almost think that she could fly, but she was there, and in my case, she had her face to the wall. So, I took this experience, which you have only as a traveler, and then put it into fiction, because I made my protagonist fall in love with that girl on the floor, which I'd seen myself. And he tries to talk to her. She doesn't answer. And he tries again, and she doesn't answer. And he comes back another time, and she doesn't answer. And then he has a clever idea. He knows where the festival will be ending. And he will be there. And he's standing at the beginning of the stairs. And then they meet, and something happens. So I'm not going to tell more than that. And anyway, the book is not here. But no, but you see, so if you ask the influence of travel on your fiction, this is one example. I could never have imagined this kind of thing if I hadn't seen it. But on the other hand, it never happened.
Yes, thanks. You mentioned one thing that reminded me. You mentioned that asking and not being answered. It's more or less the model of the letters to Poseidon. You know, the book of yours that I really, really adore, in which you every year you address Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, with a letter, and meanwhile sending him or her.
No, him.
Yeah, of course. small tokens, small little things that you come across on your journeys throughout the world, which is, for me, a gem of a book. What can, I mean, all that time asking questions to someone that you know that he won't answer, what kind of approach was that? Was the Poseidon just like someone keeping silent, and then we are those to answer? We, the readers, are those who have to answer it for ourselves.
Let me try to explain. I had finished this book, I remember, and I was in Munich. And when a writer has finished a book, there is, I'm not going to be dramatic, but there is a certain kind of strange widowship, loneliness. You've been living for 2 years with figures, with people that you have imagined, and you have to decide that the book is finished. And so you leave them alone, but in a way they leave you alone too. And then there's this empty thing, like, I'm looking all the time at my publisher, I should not. There's this empty moment, you're without them, and you've been living with them. And I remember it was a beautiful sort of spring day, though it was February. And Germans immediately all ran out to terraces to sit in the sun. And so they were sitting there, and I was walking around. And I had been into the bookshop and bought a book by Sandro Marai, Short Pieces of Trouble. And I thought, well, short pieces. I wrote short pieces when I was much younger. Why not write short pieces again? You know, one of these things, you're trying to overcome the empty moment. And I saw somebody sitting on a terrace. Sun was over it. I thought, well, why not? Sat down, ordered a glass of champagne. Sorry? Because I suddenly had an idea. Why not write short pieces? So I was entitled to some little... And then when it was brought, there was a little serviette. And the restaurant was called Poseidon. Now here, this is one. This is travel and Poseidon. Then my education, the monks. Greek Homer. Poseidon, brother of Zeus, father of many illegitimate children, he hated Odysseus because Odysseus had killed his son who had only one eye, polyphemus, absolutely. So, a strange character, Poseidon, not very nice. But here I was, and the restaurant was called Poseidon, and I thought, why not write to him? And then I live on a Mediterranean island, and in the Mediterranean, Poseidon, of course, is all-powerful. Yes. And there were questions that you always wanted to ask of the immortals. So my first letter says, now, you are an immortal. How is it to be an immortal? Because we are mortals. We have to die. What is worse? That you never can die, or that you simply can, at a certain point, disappear? So I had written to him about 23 letters, and in the other letters I tried to tell him things that I see along the road or on my travels. So in total there were 75 letters or something. Well, I hugely enjoyed me for 2 years with this, because then I read much about him and did really quite horrible things. So he would seduce a girl and then make her into a fountain. Well, imagine, I mean, first of all you sleep with the god, and 5 minutes later you're a fountain.
Sounds appealing to me.
Well, try to be a fountain. But anyway, no. But anyway, that was that book. And so you see it's always interwoven, these things. And it sounds very easy, it's not as easy as that, but you know, I remember, what did I write here? Some things, for example, from the airport of Korea, but the end of the book is, because on the island where I do live, several months a year, and when you sit on the rocks and you face the Mediterranean, you see it coming and rolling, and you, so at the end of the book, I leave my letters on the rocks, because you never know. But you see, reading about Poseidon, you come across other things in literature, like Kafka. For Kafka, Poseidon was the bookkeeper of the seas. So he imagines him not romantically like the Greeks or majestically, no. Poseidon is down under the bottom of the sea, keeping the books of the oceans. And as Kafka says, maybe at the end of time he'll come up and do a little tour. But imagine the tragic fate. But then I was imagining him, through Kafka, being on the bottom. What has he seen come down? Now, warships, but the Air France flight 2 years ago with 300 people. But also, I got interested in the animal life in the sea and read a lot about whales. And for example, I didn't discover, but I read, you know how long it takes for a whale to decompose after it's dead? It takes, and in that book, which is called The Deep, it is described methodically. It takes 1 century for a whale to be completely gone. Well, that kind of thing I only discovered by my fascination for him.
There was a brilliant part in which you're telling him about the little rock that you found somewhere in Rio de la Plata or in Buenos Aires, I'm not sure.
Sure.
And it is a habit of yours that you take little tokens, little rocks or shells wherever you go, and you. I think that you said that there are 3 conditions for a little rock to be taken by you. First, to be insignificant. Second, that to be without any valor. And third, to contain certain beauty that is not seen but by anyone but you.
I suppose so, yes. That particular piece was not a rock. It must have been part of a house. So there is red brick, and then the white or grey, how do you call it, cement, and then another piece of red. So not bigger than this. Fascinates me, so I take it. And then when I have to be in a hotel, to make the room my own, that particular piece will be there. And it's now on my work table in Menorca. And sometimes you find very interesting foreign stones or shells, and yeah, it's lovely. Presence that nature gives you.
Okay, we are approaching the end. I would like just to ask you one more question. Before that, I would really ask our lovely audience first to find any of those beautiful books by Cees Nooteboom translated into Croatian or into some other language. They are like real gems. Don't steal it, buy it maybe, or rent it or borrow it. But by Frakturine and but what I wanted to ask you, Cees, there's a legend. I don't know if it's a legend or not, that during the Second World War, Jorge Luis Borges didn't read the newspapers. He read Tacitus in a way that to read about the war in general, not the particular war. Do you think that classics, those that knowledge or those wise men given to you by your education, can teach us right now about the world we live in, and what can we learn about the world we live in right now?
Well, I would say it probably is a legend, but he said so himself. So the second, he never read newspapers. He wrote a lot for newspapers, though, strangely enough, about literature. But he claimed he never read, let's say, day-to-day politics, and then the World War started. And he decided to read the classics on the war. Now, there is something very interesting there, because if a book survives several thousand years, there must be something to it. And if the essence of war is in it, you may understand the war that is around you. That's probably what he wanted to say. And I believe that is true. If you feel a war around you, and you read, let's say, Livius or Tacitus, or some other later writer, or Tolstoy, War and Peace, the war is different, the instruments are different, the weapons are different, but the essence, of course, is different. And a text that has survived 2,000 years on the essence of something might help you to understand your own time.
So may we all understand our times better with great literature, with the books by Cees Nooteboom. I want you to give...
That's not what I said.
Well, it's my interpretation, my English is not that good. At least 10% louder applause. That's the one in the beginning, the second one. Cees Nooteboom.
Hvala vam, divno publiko, hvala Hrvoj Hefer koja je prevodila simultano, hvala Ceesu, hvala Romanu, Cees će vam rado potpisati knjige ovdje. Hvala vam još jednom i najviše hvala Ceesu i Simoni Sasari.